She's innocent, Maya shouted before the judge, rushing forward to hold the iron box tightly before the officers could take it away. If you open that box, everyone in this courtroom will know who is truly guilty. Judge Harold Whitman slammed his gavel so hard the sound cracked across the courtroom. Shut your mouth. Maya froze in the center aisle, the iron box pressed tightly against her chest. 2 officers stepped toward her, but she shook her head and backed away. Please, Your Honor. 1 minute. That's all I need. Eleanor Brooks is innocent. Daniel Reeves rose from the prosecutor's table, his voice polished and cold. Your Honor, Miss Williams is a records clerk. She has no authority to present anything to this court. She is disrupting lawful proceedings. Maya turned toward him. You know what's inside this box. For the first time, Daniel did not answer. Judge Whitman's face tightened. Remove her. Your Honor, please, Maya said, her voice trembling. If you care about the law, then let the law see the truth. Whitman leaned forward. You don't get to lecture me about the law. No, Maya whispered. But maybe someone should have. A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. At the defense table, Eleanor Brooks lifted her head. The elderly woman's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady when she said, Maya, don't let them take it. Whitman heard her, and the cold authority he had worn all morning began to crack. He rose from the bench with a suddenness that made Daniel Reeves stiffen. Judge, Reeves began. Whitman ignored him. He stepped down from the raised platform, his black robe moving sharply behind him. Judges did not walk into the well of the courtroom to seize evidence with their own hands. Judges did not abandon the bench like angry men losing control. But Harold Whitman did. He came straight toward Maya. Give me the box. Maya's breath caught. No. Whitman reached for it, but Maya twisted away and clutched the box tighter. You don't want to review it. You want to bury it. I said give it to me. His hands closed around the iron box, and Maya held on with everything she had. The courtroom erupted in stunned whispers as the metal case shifted between them, scraping against Maya's fingers while she struggled to keep it against her chest. Your Honor, one officer said carefully. Let us handle this. Whitman snapped. Stand back. Maya's shoes scraped against the narrow wooden step near the witness rail as Whitman pulled harder. Let go, he barked. Not until they see what you did. His eyes widened, and in that instant Maya knew she had spoken the one truth he feared most. Whitman's gaze darted to the counsel table. On its edge lay a slim metal letter opener used for slicing sealed envelopes. Before anyone could stop him, he snatched it up and jammed the tip against the latch of the iron box, trying to pry it loose from Maya's grip. Maya gasped and pulled the box closer. Stop. But Whitman did not stop. The metal slipped during the struggle, and a sharp pain flashed along Maya's forearm. She cried out, stumbling backward. The box nearly fell, but she caught it against her body as a dark stain began spreading along the sleeve of her blazer. Eleanor covered her mouth. Maya. Daniel Reeves stared, the color draining from his face. Judge, stop. But Whitman's panic had swallowed his judgment. He lunged forward again, one hand on the box, the other bracing against Maya's arm. As she dropped to one knee and still refused to let go, his polished shoe came down near her wounded arm, pinning her sleeve hard against the floor. Release it, he hissed. Maya looked up at him, through tears. For a heartbeat, no one moved. And then, one of the officers stepped between them. Your Honor, step back. Whitman turned on him. Do you know who I am? Yes, sir, the officer said, his voice low. That's why I'm asking you to step back. Maya pulled her arm free, shaking. Her breath came in short, uneven bursts. But she still held the iron box. Pain pulsed from her forearm, fear pressed against her ribs, and beneath both of them, something stronger began to rise. Eleanor stood slowly at the defense table, supported by her attorney. You were always afraid of that box, she said. Whitman turned toward her. Mrs. Brooks, sit down. No, Eleanor said, quiet but unshaken. I sat down for 25 years. The words struck Maya harder than the pain. 25 years was the same number stamped across the old file hidden inside the box. The same number tied to the fire report she had found the night before, and the same number connected to names no one had ever explained to her. Marcus Hill stepped into the aisle, his reporter's notebook clenched in one hand. Everyone in this room just witnessed a judge attempt to seize evidence by force. Whitman's face went pale. "Sit down, Mr. Hill." Marcus did not move. "Not this time." Daniel Reeves leaned toward Whitman, speaking urgently. "Judge, call a recess." Whitman looked around the courtroom. Reporters were standing now. Phones were out. The gallery no longer looked confused. They looked afraid of him. Maya forced herself to stand. One officer offered a hand, and this time she accepted it. The iron box had been damaged in the struggle. Its latch hung crooked, loosened by the letter opener. Maya placed it on the defense table and opened it. Her voice came out weak, but clear. "This is an order signed 25 years ago. It stopped the investigation into the fire that killed my parents." She turned the document toward the courtroom. "And the signature at the bottom belongs to Judge Harold Whitman." Eleanor began to cry. Daniel Reeves lowered his eyes, while Whitman stood frozen in the middle of his own courtroom, no longer looking like the law. He looked only like a man who had spent 25 years running from a box that had finally been opened. For several seconds, after Maya spoke Judge Whitman's name, no one in the courtroom seemed willing to move. The document trembled in her hand, stained at one corner by the blood from her arm. Yet the signature at the bottom remained clear enough for every person close to the front row to see. Harold Whitman, the same man who had worn the robe, held the gavel, and spoken of order, as if order belonged to him. Daniel Reeves was the first to recover. He stepped forward quickly, lowering his voice as though softness could erase what everyone had just witnessed. "Your Honor, we need to seal the courtroom immediately." Marcus Hill laughed once, dry and bitter. "Seal it?" After half the room recorded what happened, Reeves turned on him. "Mr. Hill, this is not a newspaper office." "No," Marcus said, lifting his phone slightly. "It's worse. It's a crime scene." Whitman's face tightened, but he did not answer. He looked at the officers, then at the open iron box, then back at Maya. The authority in his eyes had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. It was no longer the authority of a judge. It was the fear of a man calculating how much damage had already been done. "Court is in recess," Whitman said, his voice low. "Everyone out." No one moved right away. Then one of the court officers, the same man who had stepped between Whitman and Maya, spoke with careful respect. "Judge, medical assistance is on the way for Miss Williams." Whitman stared at him. "I did not ask for commentary." "No, sir," the officer replied. "But she is injured." Maya pressed a folded napkin against her arm. Someone from the defense table had handed it to her, though she could not remember who. Her forehead throbbed from the earlier fall, and her sleeve felt wet and heavy. But she refused to sit down until the box was closed and in her hands again. Eleanor watched her with quiet anguish. "Maya, child, please, let them look at your arm." Maya turned toward her. The word child landed strangely, not as an insult, not as pity, but as something old and familiar. "Why did you say you sat down for 25 years? Eleanor's lips parted, but no words came. Reeves stepped in sharply. "Mrs. Brooks, do not answer that." Maya looked at him. "Why? Because the truth is finally talking?" Before Reeves could respond, Marcus moved closer to Maya and lowered his voice. "Take the box with you. Don't let it leave your sight." "I won't," Maya whispered. The paramedics arrived minutes later, but Maya only allowed them to wrap her arm after the officer placed the iron box on the table in front of her. The medic, a gray-haired woman with calm hands, cleaned the cut and said, "You'll need stitches, honey." "I need 5 minutes," Maya replied. The medic glanced at the judge's bench, then back at Maya. "Looks to me like you needed them 20 minutes ago." That small kindness nearly broke her. Maya did not cry. She had learned not to cry in public years earlier, back when people mistook tears for weakness and silence for guilt. She simply nodded and held the box closer once her arm was wrapped. As the courtroom emptied, Whitman remained near the bench, speaking in a harsh whisper to Daniel Reeves. Maya could not hear every word, but she caught enough. "Contain this. Too many witnesses. Then find a procedure." Marcus heard it too. His expression hardened. Eleanor was escorted out slowly by her public defender, a tired man named Paul Granger, who looked as though he had aged 10 years since breakfast. As she passed Maya, Eleanor stopped. "I should have told you sooner," she whispered. Maya's throat tightened. "Told me what?" Eleanor looked at the iron box. "That it was never just my life they were trying to bury." Then she was led away. That sentence followed Maya out of the courtroom, down the marble hall, past reporters shouting questions, and into a small witness room where the officer let her sit with the box on her lap. Marcus entered a moment later, after convincing someone at the door that leaving her alone would be a mistake. "You understand what happens now?" he asked. Maya gave a tired laugh. "I lose my job? You may have just brought down a judge. I didn't bring him down. I opened a box." If Maya's courage touched your heart, please hit the like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from, because who knows? Someone near you might be watching this story at the very same moment. Marcus sat across from her. His face was lined, his eyes steady, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and still believed records mattered. "Where did you find it?" Maya looked down at the dented lid. "In the basement archive. Storage room B. It was on a cart marked for disposal." "Who ordered the disposal?" "That's the thing." Maya swallowed. "The order came from Judge Whitman's chambers." Marcus leaned back slowly. "Start from the beginning." So she did. She told him about working below the courthouse, where the air smelled like dust, toner ink, and old cardboard. She told him about the rows of metal shelves, the forgotten case files, the broken coffee maker, the older clerks who brought sweet tea in mason jars and talked about Savannah, like the city had been better when everyone knew their place. She told him how Eleanor Brooks's file had bothered her from the first page because the dates did not line up. The insurance paperwork was filed after the accusation, not before. The witness statement had 2 different timestamps. The medical report referenced an attachment that was missing. "And then," Maya said, "I found the scholarship papers." Marcus frowned. "What scholarship papers?" Eleanor wasn't keeping the insurance money. She was donating it. All of it. A scholarship fund for Black students from low-income families in Georgia. Marcus became very still. Maya nodded slowly. That's when the file stopped looking sloppy and started looking intentional. Outside the witness room, footsteps passed quickly. Voices rose and fell behind the door. Marcus tapped the iron box with one finger. "And the fire report?" Maya's hand tightened on the lid. "I didn't understand it at first. There were names I didn't know, photographs I didn't want to look at, and a court order stopping the investigation. Then, I saw Whitman's signature. And your parents?" Maya looked away. "I was adopted. I always knew that, but nobody ever told me their names." Marcus lowered his voice. "And now?" Maya opened the box just enough to see the folded paper and the brass pocket watch resting beneath it. "Now I think Eleanor knows them." The door opened before Marcus could answer. The officer stood there, expression uneasy. "Miss Williams," he said, "Judge Whitman wants the box surrendered to Chambers." Maya closed the lid. Marcus stood. Maya looked at the officer and spoke softly, but this time her voice did not shake. "Tell Judge Whitman he can file a motion." The officer did not smile when Maya said it, but something in his eyes changed. Respect, maybe, or relief. He gave a small nod and closed the door. Marcus stood beside the table, listening until the footsteps faded. "That bought us 10 minutes, maybe less." Maya looked down at the iron box. "Then we used 10 minutes. Her arm throbbed beneath the bandage, and the cut near her forehead still stung, but pain had become background noise. What mattered now was inside the box. She lifted the lid carefully. The hinge gave a tired squeak. Marcus pulled a chair close. "Show me everything." Maya took out the top court order first. This stopped the investigation into the fire 25 years ago, signed by Whitman when he was still a superior court judge. Marcus read the page, his jaw tightening. Reason listed. Insufficient evidence. There was evidence, Maya said. Photos, witness notes, an insurance statement, and a handwritten memo from a fire inspector who said the fire was deliberately set. Marcus looked up slowly. "Where's the inspector now?" "Dead," Maya said. "Heart attack, 8 years ago." Marcus gave her a long look. "Convenient." Maya reached deeper into the box and pulled out a faded envelope. On the front, written in blue ink, were the words, "For the girl, if she ever comes looking." Her breath caught. Marcus saw her hand tremble. "Maya, I saw this last night," she whispered. "But I couldn't open it." "Why not?" "Because I think it was meant for me." The room seemed smaller suddenly. The old courthouse walls, the low ceiling, the muffled noise from the hallway. Everything pressed in at once. Maya slid one finger under the flap, but before she could open it, a knock came at the door. Marcus immediately covered the papers with his notebook. "Who is it?" "Paul Granger," a tired voice answered. "Eleanor's attorney." Maya nodded, and Marcus opened the door just enough to let him in. Paul Granger looked shaken. His tie was loose, his face pale, and his leather briefcase hung from one shoulder like a burden he no longer knew how to carry. "Maya," he said quietly, "Eleanor wants to see you." "Now?" "Before they move her. Reeves is trying to have her transferred for security concerns." Marcus muttered. "Security for whom?" Paul looked at the iron box. "I don't know what you found, but I do know this. Eleanor has been protecting something. Every time I asked why she wouldn't fight harder, she said the same thing." Maya stood slowly. "What did she say?" Paul swallowed. "She said some truths can get people killed, even after 25 years. Maya closed the box and held it against her side. "Take me to her." The holding room was down a narrow hallway behind the courtroom, past 2 deputies and a vending machine humming under bad fluorescent light. Eleanor sat at a small metal table with a cup of water untouched in front of her. She looked older than she had in court, not weaker exactly, but more exposed, like the years she had carried were finally showing through her skin. When Maya entered, Eleanor's eyes went first to the bandage on her arm. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. "I am so sorry." Maya sat across from her. "Don't apologize. Tell me the truth." Paul started to speak, but Eleanor raised a hand. "No, Mr. Granger. She deserves it from me." Maya placed the iron box on the table. "You knew my parents?" Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the tears were there, but her voice remained steady. "Yes." "What were their names?" Eleanor's lips trembled. "Samuel and Denise Carter." The name Carter hit Maya like a bell struck in an empty church. Her adoptive records had always listed Williams. No Carter, no Samuel, no Denise. Just blank spaces where the past should have been. "They were good people," Eleanor said. "Your father worked maintenance at the county records office. Your mother was a nurse's aide at Street Agnes. They weren't rich, but they were brave." Maya's voice dropped. "Brave enough to do what?" Eleanor looked toward the closed door, then back at Maya. "They found documents linking Judge Whitman to a group that called itself the Heritage Order. Back then, most people pretended it was just a private civic club. It wasn't. It was built to keep power where it had always been." Marcus, standing near the wall, went very still. "I've heard that name." Eleanor nodded. "Then you know why people were afraid to say it out loud." Maya gripped the edge of the table. "And my parents were going to expose him? They had copies. Your father helped pull records. Your mother knew families who had been harmed by decisions that looked legal on paper, but were rotten underneath. And then the fire happened." Eleanor's face crumpled slightly, but she held herself together. "I was on duty that night. I found you before the official report was written. You were alive, barely, and one of the officers said your name should not appear anywhere. That was when I knew the fire wasn't just a fire." Maya could hardly breathe. "You changed my identity. I helped arrange it," Eleanor said. "A pastor, a retired clerk, and a family willing to take you in. We did what we had to do, because if Whitman knew you survived, he would have found a way to erase the last witness to what happened." Maya stared at her. "I was a baby. I couldn't witness anything." "No," Eleanor whispered. "But your parents hid something with you." Marcus stepped closer. "The pocket watch." Eleanor nodded toward the box. "Your father placed a microfilm strip inside that watch. I didn't know until years later. He must have known there wasn't time to run." Maya opened the box with shaking hands and lifted the brass pocket watch. It was heavier than it looked. scratched around the rim, stopped at 217. "What's on it?" she asked. "Names," Eleanor said. "Payments. Meetings. Proof that Whitman's robe was never clean." The hallway outside erupted with voices. Reeves was approaching. Eleanor leaned forward quickly. "Listen to me, Maya. The reason they came after me now is the scholarship. My husband wanted that insurance money to help black students who had been shut out of every door men like Whitman guarded. When Whitman heard, he made sure I looked guilty before I could sign the final papers." Maya's eyes burned. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because protecting you became the one promise I could still keep." The door opened, and Daniel Reeves stepped in with 2 deputies. "This meeting is over." Maya closed her hand around the pocket watch. Reeves noticed. "That belongs in evidence." Maya stood, her voice quiet but firm. "Then let's put it there properly, counselor. In open court, on record, where everyone can see whose fingerprints are already on it." Daniel Reeves kept his eyes on the brass pocket watch in Maya's hand, as if it were a live wire. "Miss Williams, you are interfering with evidence in an active criminal proceeding." Maya did not move. "Then we should all be thankful the room is full of witnesses." One of the deputies glanced at Reeves, uncertain. Eleanor sat very still, her hands folded around the paper cup she had not touched. Paul Granger looked from Maya to Reeves and seemed, for the first time since breakfast, to remember he was a defense attorney. "My client objects to any private seizure of that item," Paul said, his voice gaining strength. "If the state wants it, it can be logged, photographed, and admitted under chain of custody in open court." Reeves gave him a cold look. "Counselor, don't pretend you know how to handle evidence of this magnitude." Paul straightened. "I may not have your political friends, Mr. Reeves, but I know when a prosecutor is sweating." Marcus Hill stepped closer to the table. "And I know when a public official wants something off the record." Reeves' smile thinned. "Mr. Hill, you are one more word away from being removed." Marcus lifted his notebook. "Funny, Judge Whitman said the same thing before he put his hands on an injured woman in front of 50 people. For a moment, no one spoke. Reeves looked toward the hallway, where voices were gathering. Reporters, clerks, deputies, all waiting for the next official lie to be written. Maya slipped the pocket watch back into the iron box and closed the lid. Her arm burned under the bandage, but she kept her face calm. She had learned something in the last hour. Powerful men expected fear to make people careless, so she gave them stillness instead. Reeves stepped closer. "Miss Williams, you have no idea what you're standing in." Maya looked at him. "I think I do." "No, you don't." His voice dropped low enough that only those in the room could hear. "You found old paper and built a fantasy around it. You think that makes you brave, but it makes you useful to people who will abandon you when this becomes dangerous." Eleanor's voice cut through the room softly. "That is what they told her mother." Maya turned to her. Reeves froze. Eleanor looked at Maya with a grief so old it seemed almost peaceful. Denise was quiet too. Not weak. Quiet. She listened before she spoke. "Your father used to say she could hear a lie before a man finished telling it." Maya's throat tightened. "Please don't stop," Reeves snapped. "Mrs. Brooks, I strongly advise you." "No," Eleanor said, and this time there was steel beneath the age in her voice. "You have advised me enough." Paul placed a hand gently on the table. "Eleanor, only say what you want on record later." "I have waited 25 years for later," she replied. "Later is how men like them survive." Marcus wrote that down. Maya sat slowly across from Eleanor. "What happened?" "After the fire," Eleanor looked at the iron box. "The official story was electrical failure. Bad wiring in an old rental house. That was what the papers printed. What they did not print was that your father had requested certified copies of county financial ledgers 2 days before the fire. What they did not print was that Denise called me at the hospital and said if anything happened to them, I should look for a watch." Maya placed her palm on the box. "My father's watch. Yes. Samuel carried it every day. Said it was the only thing his father ever left him. When I found you, the watch was tucked inside your blanket." A memory that was not quite a memory moved through Maya. Brass against cloth, a sound like ticking, a woman humming low and scared. It vanished before she could hold it. Eleanor continued. I gave you to people I trusted. I told myself I would come forward when it was safe. Then Whitman signed the order ending the investigation. A week later, one witness lost his job. Another left Georgia. A clerk who helped your father was accused of stealing records. I understood then that safety was not coming. Maya breathed slowly. So, you stayed silent. I stayed alive long enough to keep the box hidden. Reeves let out a sharp breath. This is sentimental nonsense. Maya turned to him. Then why are you still here? The question landed harder than she expected. Reeves looked away first. A deputy appeared in the doorway. Mr. Reeves. Judge Whitman wants Miss Williams removed from the courthouse. Paul immediately stood. On what authority? The deputy hesitated. Judge's order. Marcus laughed under his breath. That's getting old fast. Maya stood, lifting the iron box with her uninjured arm. I'm not leaving without Eleanor. Reeves shook his head. That is not your decision. No, Maya said. But what happens next will be public. She turned to Marcus. Can you get copies made? Marcus nodded. Already sent photos of the order to my editor. If they take the box, the signature still exists. For the first time, Reeves looked genuinely alarmed. You photographed sealed material? Marcus smiled without warmth. You mean evidence a judge tried to steal after injuring the person holding it? Yes. The hallway noise grew louder. Someone had leaked enough for the courthouse to stir like a hive. Maya could hear reporters calling Whitman's name. She could hear phones ringing behind office doors. She could hear the system waking up, not out of conscience, but self-defense. Eleanor reached for Maya's hand. Listen to me. They will try to make this about your anger. Don't let them. Keep it about the record. Maya nodded. I don't know if I'm ready for this. No one is ready for the moment the past opens its mouth. Eleanor said. You just answer it. The door opened again. And this time, Judge Whitman stood in the hallway, flanked by two officers. He had removed his robe. Without it, he looked smaller, but not less dangerous. Miss Williams, he said evenly, you will surrender that box. Maya stepped into the doorway, injured, pale, but upright. No, sir. Whitman's eyes narrowed. You are making a terrible mistake. Behind Maya, Eleanor rose with effort. No, Harold. You made it 25 years ago. The use of his first name struck the hallway silent. Whitman looked past Maya to Eleanor, and for one brief second the mask slipped again. You should have stayed quiet. Eleanor's answer came soft and final. I did. And it still wasn't enough for you. Maya felt the weight of the box against her ribs and the weight of her parents' names inside it. She looked at Whitman and understood that chapter 1 of her life had been written by men who believed no one like her would ever read the record. Now she was holding the record in her hands. Put it on the docket, Maya said. Open court. Full transcript. Every document, every signature, every name. Whitman stared at her. Then Marcus Hill raised his phone and spoke clearly enough for everyone in the hall to hear. Judge Whitman, are you refusing to allow evidence connected to a 25-year-old closed fire investigation to be reviewed on record? Reporters surged closer. Whitman said nothing, and in that silence, Maya heard the first clean crack in the wall that had hidden her life. The hallway outside courtroom 3 filled so quickly that the deputies could no longer pretend this was a private matter. Reporters pressed near the ropes. Courthouse clerks stood in doorways, and older men in seersucker jackets whispered as if Savannah itself had been caught with its hand in a locked drawer. Judge Whitman looked at Marcus Hill's raised phone, then at Maya, then at the iron box in her arms. This proceeding will not be turned into a spectacle. Maya's voice was quiet. Then stop making it one. A few people gasped, but no one laughed. Not this time. Daniel Reeves stepped beside Whitman and spoke through clenched teeth. Miss Williams, you are risking obstruction charges. Paul Granger moved forward before Maya could answer. And you are threatening a material witness after the presiding judge physically interfered with evidence. I would choose my next words carefully. Mr. Reeves. Reeves stared at Paul as though seeing him for the first time. You suddenly found a spine. Paul's tired face hardened. No, I found my client's case. Eleanor stood behind Maya. One hand braced against the doorframe. She looked pale, but there was a calmness in her that had not been there earlier. "Harold," she said, "you can still step aside." Whitman's eyes cut toward her. "Do not speak to me like you know me." "I do know you," Eleanor replied. That has always been the problem. The hallway fell silent again. Maya felt the words settle into her bones. Eleanor was not speaking like an old woman, afraid of prison. She was speaking like someone who had spent half her life rehearsing the truth and had finally stopped protecting the man who deserved none of her mercy. Whitman turned away from her and addressed the nearest deputy. "Clear this hallway." The deputy hesitated. "Sir, the chief clerk is asking whether the hearing is continuing." "The hearing is suspended." Marcus spoke before anyone else could. "On what grounds?" Whitman's expression went cold. "On the grounds that I said so." Maya looked at the reporters, then at the courthouse staff, then back at the judge. "That's not law. That's panic." Reeves stepped toward her. "Enough." "No," Maya said, and for the first time the word felt steady in her mouth. "You both keep saying enough because you know there's more." The iron box seemed heavier now, not because of the metal, but because of the lives folded inside it. Maya thought of the brass pocket watch, the stopped hands, the order signed 25 years ago, and the parents whose names had been hidden from her like contraband. Whitman lowered his voice. "You are young, Miss Williams. You think a document explains history. It doesn't. History is complicated." Maya met his eyes. "Cover-ups usually are." Reeves reached for his phone. "I'm calling for a formal evidence hold." Marcus snorted. "You mean a quiet burial?" Reeves pointed at him. "One more accusation, and I will have you removed." Marcus stepped closer. "Then remove half the hallway too." They all heard her. They all saw you. At that moment, the chief clerk, a stern woman in her 60s named Mrs. Alden, appeared near the courtroom doors. She had worked in the courthouse longer than most of the attorneys had practiced law, and even Whitman seemed to notice when she spoke. "Judge Whitman," she said. "The administrative judge is on the phone." Whitman's face tightened. "Tell him, I am handling it." Mrs. Alden did not move. He said those exact words would not be sufficient. A low murmur moved down the hallway. Maya saw Reeves's mouth flatten. For the first time, the pressure was no longer moving only toward her. It was moving upward, toward Whitman. Mrs. Alden turned to Maya. Her eyes softened when she noticed the bandage on Maya's arm. "Miss Williams, medical staff is waiting downstairs. I'll go after the box is entered properly." The older clerk nodded once, as if that answer made perfect sense. "Then we will log it," Whitman snapped. "Mrs. Alden," she turned back to him. "Yes, Judge?" His voice was sharp. "You will not touch that box." Mrs. Alden looked at him for a long moment. "Then, I suggest you explain that instruction to the administrative judge yourself." The silence that followed was the first silence Whitman did not control. 10 minutes later, the iron box was placed on a clean evidence table inside a smaller hearing room, under the watch of 2 deputies, Paul Granger, Mrs. Alden, Marcus Hill, and a court-appointed evidence technician. Maya stood close enough to see every movement. Reeves objected to nearly every step, but his objections sounded thinner each time he made them. "Photograph the exterior," Mrs. Alden instructed. The technician took pictures. "Record visible damage to the latch." More pictures. "Record the contents without removing them until all parties acknowledge the inventory." Paul nodded. "Defense acknowledges." Reeves said nothing. Mrs. Alden looked at him. "State?" Reeves' jaw worked. "State acknowledges. Under protest." Maya almost smiled. Under protest was still on record. When the lid opened, the room seemed to lean forward. The yellowed order lay on top, followed by old photographs, sealed letters, thin financial ledgers, and the brass pocket watch. The technician lifted the court order with gloved hands and read the file number aloud. Mrs. Alden typed it into the record. Maya watched Whitman's signature appear under the camera light. There it was. No longer rumor. No longer memory. No longer something one frightened woman had carried alone. A record. Marcus stood beside Maya and murmured, "Power is never afraid of lies. It's afraid of records." Maya looked at the watch. "Then, we give it records." Paul leaned closer. "Maya, the microfilm. If it's really inside, We need a specialist to remove it without damaging it. Mrs. Alden heard him. The courthouse has an evidence lab contact in Atlanta. Reeves immediately spoke. The state objects to sending anything outside. Local custody. Maya looked at him. Of course you do. Before Reeves could respond, Eleanor's voice came from the doorway. A deputy had helped her into the room, and though she looked exhausted, her eyes were fixed on the watch. Samuel said if time ever stopped, the truth would still be moving. Maya turned slowly. He said that? Eleanor nodded. Your father liked old sayings. Most of them were terrible. A sad smile touched her mouth. That one wasn't. Maya looked back at the pocket watch, its hands frozen at 2:17. Was that when the fire started? No, Eleanor said softly. That was when the first call came in to stop the investigation. Everyone in the room went still, even Reeves. Maya felt the floor beneath her seem to tilt. Who made the call? Eleanor looked past Maya toward the hall, where Whitman stood with two officials speaking in low voices. He did, she said. Maya did not move. She only stared at the watch, at the frozen hands, at the little circle of brass that had carried her father's final warning for 25 years. Mrs. Alden's fingers hovered above the keyboard. Mrs. Brooks, are you willing to make that statement on record? Eleanor lifted her chin. Yes, ma'am. Reeves' face went gray. She is a defendant in an active case. Her statement is self-serving, Paul answered without looking at him. Then cross-examine her in open court. Maya closed the box after the inventory was complete. For the first time since she had carried it into the courtroom, it no longer felt like she was holding it alone. Outside the hearing room, courthouse bells chimed noon. Somewhere nearby, an old man complained that he had missed lunch at his favorite diner. Another voice answered that justice could wait for many things, but not meatloaf. For a strange second, Savannah sounded ordinary again. Then Mrs. Alden printed the evidence receipt and handed it to Maya, Paul, and Reeves. The box is now logged. Maya took her copy with her uninjured hand. The paper was warm from the printer. Reeves leaned close as he passed her. You have no idea what you just opened. Maya looked at him calmly. Yes, I do. He paused. She folded the receipt once and placed it inside her blazer pocket. A courtroom. By early afternoon, courtroom 3 no longer belonged to Judge Harold Whitman. That was the first thing Maya noticed when she stepped back through the doors with her arm bandaged, her forehead cleaned, and the evidence receipt folded in her blazer pocket. Whitman's chair sat empty behind the bench. His nameplate was still there, polished gold and arrogant, but the man himself had been moved to the side of the room with two administrative officials standing near him. At the bench sat Judge Caroline Mercer, a calm woman in her late 60s with silver hair, narrow glasses, and the kind of face that made excuses feel unwelcome. She looked at Maya first. Miss Williams, are you medically able to remain present? Maya stood beside Paul Granger and Eleanor Brooks. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Mercer nodded. Then we will proceed slowly, and we will proceed on the record. Daniel Reeves rose immediately. Your Honor, the state objects to this entire proceeding. Miss Williams is not counsel. She is not a party. She is an employee of this courthouse who unlawfully inserted herself into a murder trial. Maya felt the old fear return, but this time it did not take over. Judge Mercer looked at Reeves. Mr. Reeves, before this court considers your objection, it will note that the presiding judge in the original matter has been temporarily relieved from this hearing pending administrative review. A murmur moved through the gallery. Whitman's face remained still, but his hands folded too tightly in his lap. Reeves pressed on. Your Honor, that does not change the legal status of the materials. The so-called evidence box was discovered outside proper channels. Paul stood. Because it was hidden outside proper channels. Reeves turned on him. Counselor, speculation is not law. Paul replied. Neither is panic. Judge Mercer lifted one hand. Enough. Mr. Reeves, you will have your opportunity. Mr. Granger, you will have yours. Miss Williams, because you are both a courthouse employee and the person who discovered the materials, the court will hear a limited factual statement from you. Maya heard Reeves inhale sharply. She stepped forward. The courtroom seemed larger than it had that morning. Every bench was full now, and the people watching no longer looked amused or annoyed. They looked alert, hungry for truth, but afraid of what it might cost. Judge Mercer said, "Miss Williams, state your name and position." Maya Williams, Records Archive Clerk, Chatham County Courthouse. How did you come into possession of the iron box? Maya clasped her hands to stop them from shaking. It was in storage room B, on a disposal cart, attached to files connected to the case of Eleanor Brooks. The disposal order came from Judge Whitman's chambers. Reeves stood. Objection. Foundation. Judge Mercer looked at Maya. "Do you have documentation?" "Yes, Your Honor." Maya pulled the receipt copy and a photocopied disposal form from her folder. The form was logged through internal records at 6:42 p.m. last Friday. Mrs. Alden approached and handed the copies to the clerk. Judge Mercer reviewed them without expression. Reeves said, "Internal paperwork can be misunderstood." Marcus Hill muttered from the gallery. "So can fraud, apparently." Judge Mercer's eyes lifted. "Mr. Hill, I will not warn you twice." Marcus raised both hands. "Yes, ma'am," Maya continued. "When I reviewed the Brooks file, I found inconsistent dates, missing attachments, and references to financial documents that were not in the official case record. The box contained those missing documents, along with older materials tied to a fire investigation from 25 years ago. At the word fire, Whitman looked up. Maya saw it. So did Judge Mercer. Daniel Reeves stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is precisely the problem. We are now wandering into unrelated history." Eleanor spoke before Paul could stop her. "It is not unrelated." Judge Mercer turned to her. "Mrs. Brooks, you will have a chance to speak through counsel." Eleanor nodded, but her eyes stayed on Maya. "Yes, Your Honor." Maya took one breath. "The older materials include a court order signed by Judge Whitman, terminating the investigation into that fire. The names listed in the file are Samuel and Denise Carter." Judge Mercer paused. "And what is your connection to those names?" The room seemed to lean toward her. Maya's voice softened. "I believe they were my biological parents." Reeves stood again. "Objection. Belief is not evidence." Maya looked at him. "Then let the pocket watch be examined." His face tightened. Judge Mercer noticed that too. "What pocket watch?" Paul answered. "An item found inside the iron box, Your Honor. Mrs. Brooks has stated that it may contain microfilm, relevant to the old investigation." Judge Mercer turned to Reeves. "Does the state object to forensic examination?" Reeves hesitated just long enough to damage himself. "The state objects to removing the item from local custody." "Noted," Judge Mercer said. "Overruled." A low sound rolled through the courtroom. Whitman leaned toward Reeves and whispered something. Reeves did not look at him. Judge Mercer continued. "The item will be transferred to an independent forensic lab under sealed chain of custody. Representatives from the state and defense may observe. Miss Williams, you will provide a written statement. Mrs. Brooks, your current trial is stayed pending evidentiary review." Eleanor closed her eyes. For the first time all day, her shoulders lowered. Maya felt the shift in the room like sunlight through a cracked door. But Daniel Reeves was not finished. He turned toward Maya, his voice smooth again. "Miss Williams, may I ask one question for clarity?" Judge Mercer looked wary. "One question." Reeves faced Maya. "Isn't it true that you never completed law school?" Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Yes." "And isn't it true that you have no training in criminal evidence?" Paul objected, but Maya spoke first. "I have training in records." Reeves smiled faintly. "Records are not trials." "No," Maya said. "But trials are built from records. That's why you're afraid of them." The room went silent. Judge Mercer's mouth did not smile, but her eyes sharpened. "That will be enough, Mr. Reeves." Maya stepped back beside Eleanor. The older woman reached for her hand, careful of the bandage. "You did well," she whispered. Maya looked toward Whitman. His face was turned away, but she could see the muscle working in his jaw. "I don't think this is over," Maya said. Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. "No, child. It's just finally begun." By the time Maya left the courthouse, Savannah had already begun choosing sides. News vans lined the curb along Bull Street. Their satellite dishes pointed toward the gray afternoon sky. Reporters called her name as she stepped through the side entrance with Marcus Hill beside her and the evidence receipt still tucked inside her blazer. Her arm ached beneath the bandage, but the pain kept her focused. "Miss Williams, did Judge Whitman attack you over evidence?" one reporter shouted. "Is it true the Brooks trial has been suspended? Are you related to the victims in the old fire case?" Maya kept walking. Marcus leaned close. "Don't answer yet. First rule of surviving a powerful man. Don't give him a sentence he can twist before dinner." Maya gave a tired nod. "Where are we going?" "My office," Marcus said. "Then the archives." Maya stopped. "I can't go back down there. Whitman's chambers ordered that disposal. If there are more records, they may already be gone. That's exactly why we're going." The Savannah Herald occupied the second floor of an old brick building near Broughton Street, above a tailor shop and beside a diner that smelled like fried chicken, black coffee, and pecan pie. Marcus led Maya through a narrow stairwell, past framed front pages yellowed with age. His office was crowded with file boxes, newspapers, and photographs of people whose stories had once embarrassed powerful men. Maya sat carefully in a wooden chair while Marcus poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "Sugar?" "No." "You sure? You look like you've had the kind of day that requires sugar." "I need my hands steady." Marcus set the mug in front of her. "Then coffee it is." His editor, a sharp-eyed woman named Lorraine Price, stepped in moments later holding printed photos from Marcus's phone. She was in her early 60s, with gray curls, red reading glasses, and the calm irritation of someone who had spent decades correcting men who thought volume was evidence. Lorraine looked at Maya's bandage first. "Did he do that?" Maya hesitated. "Everyone saw enough." "That's not what I asked." "Yes," Maya said quietly. Lorraine's mouth tightened. "Then we proceed carefully and publicly." Marcus spread the photos across the desk. Whitman's signature on the old order, the damaged iron box, the evidence log, the disposal form from Whitman's chambers. Lorraine studied each one without speaking. Finally, she tapped the disposal order. "This is the thread." Maya leaned forward. "Why?" "Because judges don't usually care about basement storage. If Whitman ordered that box destroyed, he knew exactly what was inside." Marcus nodded. "And if he knew, someone told him the box had resurfaced." Maya thought of storage room B, the disposal cart, the rows of shelves, the older clerks who never met anyone's eyes when Whitman's name came up. "There's a digital request log. It records who accessed file locations." Lorraine looked at her. "Can you get it?" "I can try." Marcus shook his head. "No. You are injured, under pressure, and probably being watched. We request it through public records and court administration." Maya let out a bitter breath. "That'll take weeks. Not if the administrative judge wants to look clean before the 6 o'clock news," Lorraine said. Marcus smiled faintly. "That's why I keep her around." Lorraine ignored him. "Miss Williams, tell me about the scholarship." Maya took the folder Paul had copied for her and placed it on the desk. Eleanor's husband left a $2 million policy. She wasn't trying to keep it. She had paperwork ready to donate it to a scholarship fund for black students from low-income families in Georgia. Lorraine's eyes moved up. "And Whitman knew?" Eleanor said he did. Marcus folded his arms. The Heritage Order hated scholarship programs like that. Called them political charity back in the day. Maya looked at him. "You said you'd heard of them." Marcus's face grew heavy. Everybody my age who worked local news heard whispers. Judges, bankers, police captains, city councilmen. They didn't march in robes. They wore suits, sat on boards, and decided who got loans, licenses, jobs, and second chances. Lorraine added softly, "That kind of hate ages well when it learns paperwork." Maya stared at the old court order. "My parents found proof?" "That's what Eleanor says," Marcus replied. "Now we need records that say it too." They went to the courthouse archives just before closing, but not through the main entrance. Marcus knew Mrs. Alden, and Mrs. Alden knew exactly which doors did not draw attention. She met them at a staff elevator, with her purse over one arm and her expression set in stone. "You have 15 minutes, she said. Maya blinked. "You're helping us?" Mrs. Alden looked offended. "I'm helping the record. Don't make it sentimental. The basement archive felt different now. Yesterday it had been dusty and dull, a forgotten place beneath the machinery of law. Tonight, every shelf seemed to hold its breath. Maya led them to storage room B, where the disposal cart still stood near the back wall. The label was gone. So, someone came back, Marcus said. Maya opened the access terminal and typed with her uninjured hand. Her password still worked. That surprised her more than it should have. Mrs. Alden stood behind her. Pull the activity log for Brooks, Eleanor. Then Carter. Samuel. Then Carter. Denise. Maya's fingers paused at the names. Typing them felt like touching a grave. The screen loaded slowly. Then a list appeared. Maya whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus leaned in. "What?" "These files were accessed last week. Not by archive staff." Mrs. Alden adjusted her glasses. "Whose credentials?" "He." Maya clicked the entry. The name appeared in plain black text. Daniel Reeves. Marcus let out a low whistle. The prosecutor was in the old fire file before the Brooks hearing. "And look," Maya said, scrolling down. Whitman's chambers accessed it 2 hours later. Mrs. Alden pulled out her phone and photographed the screen. "This log is now preserved." A sound came from the hallway. All three of them turned. A young deputy stood at the door, uncomfortable but firm. "Mrs. Alden, Judge Whitman's office is asking why Miss Williams is in restricted records." Mrs. Alden stepped forward. "Tell Judge Whitman's office I am conducting an administrative audit." The deputy shifted. "They said to remove her." Mrs. Alden's voice became cold. "They can remove me with her." The deputy hesitated, then looked at Maya. Something in his face softened. "You should hurry." Maya printed the log. The old printer groaned like it resented being part of history, then pushed out 3 pages that changed everything. Reeves had not stumbled into the Brooks case. He had prepared it. Whitman had followed behind him. Together, they had reached into a 25-year-old fire file days before Eleanor was supposed to be convicted. Marcus took 1 copy, Mrs. Alden took another, and Maya folded the 3rd into her folder. As they left the archive, she looked back at the shelves and understood that records were not silent things. They waited. They endured. They remembered for people who could not. Outside, evening had settled over Savannah. The courthouse lamps glowed against the old stone walls, and somewhere nearby, an elderly man was helping his wife into a parked Chevrolet while telling her to watch the curb. Ordinary life kept moving. That almost hurt. Marcus walked beside Maya toward the street. "You know what this means." Maya nodded. Reeves knew about the fire before Eleanor's trial, and Whitman knew the box could connect them. Maya looked down at the folder under her arm. Then, Eleanor wasn't just framed because of the scholarship. Marcus's voice softened. "No, she was framed because she was the last living person who could connect you to what they buried." Maya stopped walking. Across the street, Judge Whitman stood beside a black sedan, speaking to Daniel Reeves beneath the courthouse lights. They both turned at the same time and saw her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Whitman looked at the folder in Maya's hand, and the old fear returned to his face. Maya did not look away. Not this time. Maya stood under the courthouse lamps with the folder tucked against her side, watching Judge Whitman and Daniel Reeves across the street. Neither man spoke at first. Whitman's black sedan idled at the curb, its headlights pale against the early evening, while Reeves held his briefcase in one hand and stared at her as if she had stepped out of a file that should have stayed closed. Marcus touched her elbow. "Don't go near them." "I wasn't planning to." Whitman said something to Reeves, too low for Maya to hear. Reeves looked angry, but Whitman looked worse. He looked cornered. Mrs. Alden came up behind them, purse clutched tight under her arm. "Miss Williams, whatever you printed, make copies before you go home," Marcus said. "Already happening." Maya looked at him. He lifted his phone. "Lorraine has the access log. 3 copies, 2 servers, 1 old-fashioned printer, because she doesn't trust the cloud." For the first time all day, Maya almost smiled. Across the street, Reeves opened the sedan door for Whitman, but the judge did not get in. He looked directly at Maya and called out, "Miss Williams." Marcus stepped in front of her. Not a good idea, Judge. Whitman ignored him. You are being used. Maya's fingers tightened around the folder. By whom? By a frightened old woman and a reporter who has built his career turning suspicion into headlines. Marcus gave a dry laugh. I'd respond, but your record is doing better than I ever could. Whitman's eyes stayed on Maya. You think this is about your parents. You think grief gives you authority. Maya crossed the street slowly, stopping before she reached the curb. She kept enough distance that everyone could see she was not afraid and not foolish. No, she said. Records give me authority. Reeves stepped beside Whitman. Miss Williams, you are dangerously close to defamation. Maya looked at him. You accessed Samuel and Denise Carter's fire file last week. The words struck both men differently. Reeves went still. Whitman's face hardened. That is an internal court matter, Reeves said. No, Maya replied. It is a dead couple, a hidden investigation, and a woman you tried to send to prison. Whitman's voice dropped. You do not know what happened 25 years ago. Then let the microfilm prove you right. For one brief second, the city noise seemed to fade. Passing cars, distant horns, reporters murmuring behind her. All of it fell away beneath the weight of that sentence. Whitman looked at the folder again. Some things were settled for the good of this city. Maya felt the air leave her chest. My parents were not a city expense. Reeves caught Whitman's arm, a silent warning. Judge, we should leave. But Whitman had already said enough. Marcus heard it. Mrs. Alden heard it. 2 reporters nearby heard it too, and their phones were raised. Whitman realized too late. He got into the sedan without another word. Reeves followed, but before he closed the door, he looked back at Maya. You should be careful, he said. Maya answered. So should men who leave their names in old files. The sedan pulled away. Maya did not move until its taillights turned the corner. Marcus stepped beside her. That was not a denial. No, Maya said. It was worse. Mrs. Alden's expression was grave. It sounded like a confession wearing Sunday clothes. They returned to the Herald office just after dark. Lorraine Price had already spread the copied access logs, court order, scholarship documents, and photographs across a long conference table. A pot of coffee sat beside a paper bag of biscuits from the diner downstairs. But no one seemed hungry. Lorraine pointed to the old fire file number. We checked the public index. The case was listed as accidental fire until 3 days after the incident. Then, it became administrative closure. No hearing transcript, no final investigative summary. Marcus frowned. That doesn't happen by accident. No, Lorraine said. It happens when somebody with a robe signs a piece of paper, and everyone else decides their mortgage matters more than the truth. Maya sat at the table, staring at the names Samuel Carter and Denise Carter printed side by side. They looked too ordinary for what they had become. Parents, victims, strangers, hers. Lorraine noticed her silence. You don't have to read everything tonight. I do, Maya said. I've already lost 25 years. Marcus pulled one document from the pile. Then start here. It was an old summary from a county finance office. Samuel Carter had requested copies of payment records tied to several civic foundations. One name appeared repeatedly in the donor notes. Heritage Order Benevolent Society. Maya read the name aloud. Lorraine leaned back. They liked words like benevolent, made hate sound like charity. Marcus added, the group publicly claimed to preserve Southern tradition. Privately, they fought school integration programs, minority business grants, voting access drives, anything that shifted power. Maya turned the page. Whitman was listed as legal counsel before he became untouchable, Marcus said. Another document showed a meeting schedule from 25 years ago. The date was circled in red, 2 days before the fire. Maya read the location. Magnolia Club. Lorraine nodded. Old private club on the river. Judges, developers, bankers, men who called each other by first names and called everyone else a problem. Maya found a handwritten note paperclipped to the back. The ink had faded, but the words were still readable. Samuel says he has the ledger. Denise wants to go public before Friday. H.W. Cannot let that happen. Maya stopped breathing for a moment. Marcus read over her shoulder and quietly said, H.W. Lorraine's jaw tightened. Harold Whitman. Maya touched the page with her fingertips. My parents were going to expose him. Marcus nodded, and Eleanor was close enough to see what happened after. Maya looked toward the iron box sitting on the table. She said the pocket watch has names, payments, meetings. Lorraine checked her watch. The forensic courier leaves for Atlanta at 6 in the morning. Until then, the watch stays in court custody, under Mrs. Alden's seal. Maya's face changed. At the courthouse, Marcus saw the fear immediately. 2 deputies are posted. 2 deputies didn't stop Whitman from stepping off the bench. Lorraine picked up her phone. Then we make noise. Quiet things disappear. Public things become harder to steal. Maya stood and reached for her coat. I need to see Eleanor. Marcus shook his head. Not tonight. She saved my life. She knows the rest. She also just became the most important witness in Georgia, Lorraine said. Her attorney should be with her. Maya looked at both of them. Then call Paul. 20 minutes later, Paul Granger answered from the county detention medical wing. His voice sounded strained. Eleanor is safe. Shaken, but safe. Maya took the phone. Mr. Granger, please tell her I know about the heritage order. There was silence on the line. Then Paul said softly, She's asking if you found the meeting note. Maya closed her eyes. Yes. Paul repeated something away from the phone. A moment later, Eleanor's weak voice came through. Maya, I'm here. Then listen carefully. Your mother kept a second copy. Maya gripped the phone. Where? In the one place Whitman would never search. Maya could hear Eleanor breathing slowly, gathering strength. The scholarship file, Eleanor whispered. Your mother hid the old truth inside the future she wanted you to have. Maya held the phone so tightly her fingers ached. The scholarship file? Eleanor's breathing was faint on the other end. Yes, Denise said. If men like Whitman hated the future, they would never think to search inside it. Marcus and Lorraine exchanged a look across the conference table. Paul Granger's voice came back on the line. Maya, Eleanor needs rest. The nurse is giving me that look people give lawyers when they want us to leave. Maya swallowed. Tell her I heard her. A soft pause followed. Then Eleanor whispered, Be careful with hope, child. It can cut deeper than fear when it finally opens. The call ended. For a moment, no one in the Herald office spoke. Outside the windows, Savannah glowed under street lamps, elegant and quiet, as if the city had not spent decades hiding rot beneath polished brick and church bells. Lorraine reached for the scholarship documents. Where is the original file? Maya pointed to the second folder. The copy I found was attached to Eleanor's insurance papers, but the original should be with the estate filings, probably in probate storage or the clerk's annex. Marcus frowned. Can we access it tonight? Mrs. Alden had returned to the courthouse, and without her, the legal doors were harder to open. Lorraine picked up her phone. I know a retired probate clerk who owes me a favor and still goes to bed at 9 like the world is ending. Marcus checked the wall clock. It's 8:37. Then I'll be charming fast. Lorraine stepped into her office. Maya sat with her hands clasped, trying not to stare at the blood that had dried at the edge of her sleeve. She should have gone to the hospital. She should have eaten something. She should have been lying down with pain medicine and a police statement. Instead, all she could think about was Denise Carter hiding evidence inside papers meant to educate black students who had not even been born yet. Marcus slid a biscuit toward her. Eat. I'm not hungry. I didn't ask. Maya looked at him. He shrugged. I'm 58. That gives me limited authority to be irritating. Despite everything, she took the biscuit. It tasted like butter and salt and real life. That almost made her cry. Marcus softened his voice. You're doing well. I don't feel well. Nobody does when the ground under their life turns out to be a file cabinet. Maya stared at the table. Eleanor knew who I was the moment she saw me. I think so. Then why didn't she tell me before? Marcus took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Because protection becomes a habit, especially for older folks who spent their lives surviving powerful people. Sometimes silence starts as love and becomes a prison. Maya looked at the iron box on the table. I don't know whether to thank her or be angry. You're allowed both. Lorraine returned with her coat already on. Probate Annex. 10 minutes. My friend says if anyone asks, we're reviewing a clerical discrepancy. Marcus stood. That sounds illegal. It sounds like journalism with paperwork. They drove in Marcus's old Ford Crown Victoria, the kind of car that smelled faintly of coffee, newsprint, and rain. Maya sat in the back with the scholarship copies on her lap. Through the window, she saw couples leaving restaurants, older women carrying leftovers in white paper bags, men in ball caps talking beside pickup trucks. Savannah kept offering ordinary scenes, and each one felt like a question. How many private griefs had walked these streets unnoticed? The probate annex sat behind the courthouse in a low brick building with narrow windows and a security desk staffed by an older guard reading a paperback. Lorraine's retired clerk, Mrs. Beatrice Cole, met them at the side entrance wearing a cardigan over her nightgown and sneakers without socks. I hope this is worth missing jeopardy, Beatrice said. Lorraine kissed her cheek. It is. Beatrice looked at Maya's bandage, then at Marcus. This about Whitman? Marcus raised an eyebrow. News travels. Honey. Scandal walks faster in Savannah than an ambulance. She unlocked the side door. Come on. Inside, the annex smelled like floor wax and old paper. Beatrice led them to a records room, where estate files sat in numbered drawers. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent 40 years knowing where truth was misfiled. Brooks, Eleanor, she murmured, pulling open a drawer. Recent estate attachments, insurance, charitable designation. She stopped. The folder space was empty. Maya's stomach dropped. It's gone. Beatrice's expression hardened. Not gone. Pulled. Marcus stepped closer. By whom? Beatrice checked the sign-out ledger clipped to the inside of the drawer. That's funny. Lorraine leaned over. Funny how? No signature. Just an internal transfer stamp. Beatrice held the page under the light. Transferred to judicial review. Maya already knew the answer before she asked. Which chambers? Beatrice looked up. Whitman. Lorraine cursed softly. Marcus turned toward the door. Then we came too late. No, Maya said. They all looked at her. She was staring at the drawer, at the empty space where the file should have been. Denise hid something inside the scholarship file because she knew someone might pull the main record. But if it was an estate filing, there would be copies. Beatrice slowly smiled. You worked archives long enough to understand old clerks. Maya nodded. Clerks don't trust originals. Beatrice chuckled once and walked to a cabinet marked duplicate receipts and attachments. Your mother may have been brave, but whoever filed this was smart enough to pay the copy fee. She opened the cabinet and searched through a row of thin folders. After a minute, she pulled one free and laid it on the table. Eleanor Brooks, Charitable Education, Trust. Maya's hands trembled as she opened it. The first pages were ordinary. Insurance policy references, scholarship language, bank instructions, eligibility requirements for low-income students across Georgia. Then, tucked behind the donor intent statement, she found a sealed cream-colored envelope flattened by time. On the front was written one line in careful handwriting. For Maya, if she lives to ask why. The room went utterly still. Marcus whispered, That's your mother. Maya could not speak. She opened the envelope slowly, afraid the paper might dissolve under her fingers. Inside was a letter and a narrow strip of old photographic film protected in wax paper. Maya read the first line aloud, her voice breaking. My sweet girl, if this reaches you, then the truth outlived the fire. Lorraine covered her mouth. Maya kept reading silently, her eyes moving faster, then slower, then stopping at a paragraph near the bottom. What is it? Marcus asked. Maya looked up, pale. My mother wrote that Whitman wasn't just legal counsel for the Heritage Order. Beatrice crossed herself quietly. Maya finished the sentence. She wrote that he helped choose the targets. Maya read the sentence again, hoping she had misunderstood it. She had not. Harold Whitman helped choose the targets. The words sat on the old paper with a calmness that made them more terrible. There was no shouting in her mother's handwriting, no dramatic accusation, no desperate ornament. Denise Carter had written like a nurse charting a patient's decline. Clear, careful, and certain. Marcus reached for the edge of the table, but did not touch the letter. Read the next line. Maya swallowed. She says the Heritage Order kept a list of families, churches, black-owned businesses, and scholarship organizers who were becoming socially disruptive. That was their phrase. Lorraine's face went hard. Socially disruptive. God help us. Beatrice Cole lowered herself into a chair. I remember that language. Men used it at luncheons when they meant people who wouldn't stay quiet. Maya continued, her voice steadier now because shock had begun turning into something sharper. My father found payment ledgers tied to shell charities. Some money went to private investigators, some to campaign consultants, and some to people listed only by initials. H.W. appears beside several entries. Marcus leaned over the wax paper strip. The microfilm may be the ledger. Maya nodded slowly. And this letter is the map. Lorraine took out her phone. We need this copied, sealed, and witnessed right now. Beatrice stood at once. There's an old scanner in the back. It sounds like a dying lawnmower, but it works. Marcus gave a grim smile. That machine may save Georgia tonight. They moved quickly, not carelessly. Beatrice made 2 paper copies of Denise Carter's letter. Lorraine photographed every page, and Marcus wrote down the time, location, and names of everyone present. Maya watched the scanner light move beneath her mother's words and felt something inside her shift. For 25 years, her mother had been a blank space. Now she was ink, evidence, courage. When the copies were finished, Lorraine placed the original letter and the microfilm strip into a clean envelope. This goes to Judge Mercer first thing in the morning. No, Maya said. Everyone turned to her. Maya looked at the envelope. Tonight. If Whitman already pulled the original scholarship file, he knows there might be another copy. We cannot wait until morning. Marcus nodded. She's right. Beatrice looked toward the dark hallway. The administrative judge has an emergency clerk on call. Mrs. Alden will know how to reach Judge Mercer. Lorraine was already dialing. Then Mrs. Alden is about to get a very unpleasant phone call. While Lorraine spoke in the corner, Maya sat with the copy of her mother's letter. She read the final paragraph again. If Maya lives, do not let her grow up inside fear. Give her a name that can survive. Give her ordinary mornings if you can. But if she ever asks why, tell her we loved the truth enough to leave it behind. Maya closed her eyes. For years, she had imagined her birth parents in fragments. A blurred woman, a silent man, a fire she never remembered but somehow carried. She had wondered whether they had wanted her, whether they had lost her by accident, whether the emptiness in her life was just bad luck written in official language. Now she knew. They had fought. They had hidden proof. They had loved her enough to think beyond their own survival. Marcus sat across from her. Maya, she opened her eyes. You don't have to become the whole case tonight. I think I already am. No. You are a witness, a daughter, a records clerk who did her job better than the people paid to protect the law. Don't let them turn you into a symbol so quickly that you forget you're a person. Maya gave a small, tired smile. That sounds like something Eleanor would say. Eleanor has been right more often than comfortable. Lorraine returned. Mrs. Alden reached Judge Mercer. Emergency submission in chambers tonight. We meet at the courthouse in 30 minutes. Beatrice grabbed her keys. I'll drive. Nobody stops an old woman in sneakers. Marcus muttered. That is legally questionable. It is Southern strategy, Beatrice replied. The courthouse looked different at night. Without the daytime crowd, its stone columns appeared colder, almost watchful. Mrs. Alden met them at a side entrance with 2 deputies Maya did not recognize. Judge Mercer was waiting in a small conference room upstairs, wearing a navy cardigan over her blouse and the expression of a woman who had not planned on history interrupting her evening tea. She looked at Maya's bandaged arm, then at the envelope. Tell me what you found. Maya placed the copied letter on the table, a duplicate scholarship file. Inside it was a letter from Denise Carter, my biological mother, and a microfilm strip believed to contain financial ledgers connected to the Heritage Order. Judge Mercer did not react outwardly, but her eyes sharpened. And the connection to Judge Whitman? Marcus answered carefully. The letter states that Whitman served not only as legal counsel, but as someone involved in identifying targets. Judge Mercer read the first page, then the second. The room stayed silent, except for the soft turn of paper. At last, she looked up. This court will order immediate protective custody of the letter and microfilm. The microfilm will be transferred with the pocket watch to the independent lab in Atlanta. Mr. Reeves will not supervise the transfer. Maya breathed out. Mrs. Alden typed the order. Judge Mercer looked at Maya again. Miss Williams, I am also ordering that Eleanor Brooks remain under protected medical supervision and not be transferred without my approval. Thank you. Maya whispered. Judge Mercer's voice softened only slightly. Do not thank me yet. If this is what it appears to be, tomorrow will be uglier than today. Marcus said. Truth usually is at first. Before anyone could answer, the conference room phone rang. Mrs. Alden picked it up, listened, then slowly covered the receiver. It's Daniel Reeves, she said. He says Judge Whitman is demanding an emergency injunction to stop the transfer of all materials. Judge Mercer removed her glasses and set them on the table. On what grounds? Mrs. Alden listened again. Then her face tightened. National security concern. Lorraine laughed once, without humor. That old costume. Judge Mercer stood. Tell Mr. Reeves that if Judge Whitman wants to make that argument, he can make it in open court at 9 tomorrow morning. Mrs. Alden repeated the message, then hung up. Maya looked down at her mother's letter as the new order printed. The paper slid from the machine, warm, official, alive. For once, a document was not being used to bury the truth. It was being used to protect it. As they left chambers, Marcus walked beside Maya through the dim hallway. You understand what tomorrow is now? Maya nodded. Not Eleanor's trial. No, he said. Whitman's. Maya looked toward the darkened courtroom doors. Behind them sat the bench where Harold Whitman had once seemed untouchable. He chose my parents, she said quietly. He chose Eleanor. He chose who got erased. Marcus opened the side door, letting in the humid Georgia night. Then tomorrow, we let the record choose him. At 9 the next morning, the courthouse did not feel like a courthouse. It felt like a city holding its breath. Maya entered through the side doors with Marcus Hill on her left and Paul Granger on her right. Her arm was bandaged beneath a clean navy blazer Mrs. Alden had quietly found for her from a courthouse donation closet. It did not fit perfectly, but it made her feel less exposed. In her pocket was a copy of Judge Mercer's protective order. In her hand was nothing. For the first time since this began, she was not carrying the iron box. That frightened her more than she expected. Marcus noticed. It's safer in evidence custody. I know, but you don't feel safer. Maya looked toward courtroom 3. No, inside. Every seat was filled. Older couples sat shoulder to shoulder with reporters, attorneys, courthouse staff, retired clerks, churchwomen in Sunday hats, though it was not Sunday, and men who looked like they had spent their lives trusting men like Harold Whitman. Eleanor Brooks sat at the defense table, pale but composed, with Paul beside her. Daniel Reeves stood at the prosecution table reading from a folder he had probably rewritten 3 times before sunrise. Judge Mercer entered, and everyone rose. Be seated, she said. The room settled quickly. Judge Mercer looked first at Reeves. Mr. Reeves, the court received notice that Judge Whitman intends to challenge the transfer of evidence to the independent lab on national security grounds. Since Judge Whitman is not counsel of record in this matter, I will hear from the state first. Reeves stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, the state believes certain historical materials discovered by Miss Williams may contain references to private civic organizations, public officials, and sealed administrative matters. Their release without review could cause irreparable harm, Marcus whispered from the gallery. To whom? Judge Mercer glanced in his direction. Mr. Hill. He lowered his voice. Yes, Your Honor, Reeves continued. We are not objecting to truth. We are objecting to reckless disclosure. Maya felt Eleanor's eyes on her from across the room. Judge Mercer asked, Is the state arguing that the materials are false? Reeves paused. The state has not had adequate time to assess authenticity. Is the state arguing that the materials are irrelevant? They concern events 25 years old. That, was not my question. Reeves's jaw tightened. The state reserves judgment. Judge Mercer leaned back slightly. That is a very expensive way to say no. A faint ripple moved through the courtroom. Paul Granger stood. Your Honor, the defense believes the materials are directly relevant. Mrs. Brooks was accused of killing her husband for insurance money. The newly admitted scholarship documents show she intended to donate the entire amount to an education trust. The older records explain why that decision made her a target. Reeves objected. Speculation. Paul turned toward him. Then let the evidence be examined. Judge Mercer nodded. Miss Williams, step forward. Maya rose. Her legs felt steady, which surprised her. She walked to the witness table, took the oath, and sat facing a room that no longer looked at her as a disruption. That was almost harder. Judge Mercer said, Miss Williams, yesterday you discovered a duplicate scholarship file. Explain how. Maya kept her voice calm. Mrs. Brooks told me my mother had hidden a second copy of certain records inside the scholarship file. With Mrs. Beatrice Cole, a retired probate clerk, Marcus Hill, and Lorraine Price present, we located a duplicate charitable education trust file in the probate annex. Inside was a letter from Denise Carter and a protected microfilm strip. Reeves rose. Objection. Hearsay as to the contents of the letter. Judge Mercer looked at him. The letter is in protective custody and will be authenticated. Overruled for purposes of this hearing. Maya continued. The letter states that Judge Harold Whitman was connected to the Heritage Order and helped identify people the organization considered threats. Reeves stood again. Your Honor, this is outrageous. A deceased woman's unsworn letter is being used to smear a sitting judge. A voice came from the back of the courtroom. I am not sitting anymore, Mr. Reeves. Every head turned. Harold Whitman stood near the rear doors in a dark suit. No robe, no bench, no gavel. Without those things, he looked less like justice and more like an old man who had mistaken fear for dignity. Judge Mercer's eyes hardened. Judge Whitman, you were not invited to address the court. Whitman walked forward anyway. Then perhaps this court should have invited the truth. Maya felt the room tighten around her. Paul whispered, Stay calm. Whitman stopped a few feet from the witness table. Miss Williams, do you know what your parents were involved in? Maya looked at Judge Mercer. Not at him. Judge Mercer said, You will direct your remarks to the bench. Whitman ignored her. They were not heroes. They were reckless people playing with matters they did not understand. Maya turned to him slowly. They understood enough for you to stop the investigation. His lips pressed into a thin line. Reeves said sharply, Judge Whitman, I strongly advise. Whitman cut him off. You advise too late. The courtroom went silent. Whitman looked at Maya with a kind of controlled contempt that felt older than both of them. Your parents were going to ignite unrest in this city. They had documents they could not interpret and accusations they could not prove. I made a decision to preserve order. Maya's hands tightened in her lap. By burying them, gasps moved through the gallery. Whitman's eyes narrowed. Careful. No, Maya said, and her voice surprised even her. It did not shake. You don't get to say that word to me. Not after 25 years. Judge Mercer leaned forward. Judge Whitman, did you sign the order terminating the Carter fire investigation? Whitman's gaze stayed on Maya. I signed many orders. This one. Mrs. Alden placed a copy before him. Whitman looked at the page but did not touch it. Yes. The admission moved through the room like thunder that had forgotten to be loud. Judge Mercer asked, Did you have prior knowledge of the Heritage Order's interest in Samuel and Denise Carter? Reeves quickly said, Your Honor, Judge Whitman should have counsel present. Whitman laughed once, bitterly. Now you remember procedure. Judge Mercer's voice was cold. Answer only if you choose to. Whitman looked at Maya. Your mother should have stayed out of things that did not concern her. Maya leaned forward. Her life concerned her. Her child concerned her. The truth concerned her. And what will you do with that truth? Whitman asked. Turn it into a headline? A scholarship dinner? A speech about justice for people who only respect the law when it favors them? Eleanor stood slowly at the defense table. That hatred is why you framed me. Whitman turned toward her. You should have kept the money quiet. I was going to give it away. To people who would use it to demand more. To students, Eleanor said. Adults trying to build lives you couldn't control. Maya watched Judge Mercer's face as Eleanor spoke. The judge heard it. Everyone heard it. The motive was no longer hidden beneath legal language. Whitman looked back at Maya. You think this ends with me? No, Maya said. I think it starts with you. For the first time. He had no answer. Judge Mercer struck her gavel once. The evidence transfer will proceed. The court is also referring this matter to the State Judicial Conduct Commission and the Attorney General's office for immediate review. Judge Whitman, you are advised to retain counsel before making any further statements. Whitman stood still, staring at Maya, and in his silence, she saw the thing he had protected all these years finally begin to die. Not his reputation. His certainty that no one like her would ever be believed. The court emptied slowly, as if no one trusted the floor beneath them anymore. People spoke in low voices, not because Judge Mercer had ordered quiet, but because the old rules of the room had been broken, and no one knew what should replace them. Harold Whitman left through a side door with 2 officials beside him. Daniel Reeves stayed behind long enough to gather his papers, though his hands moved too carefully, like a man trying not to show they were shaking. Maya remained seated at the witness table until Eleanor came to her. You should have let me speak sooner, Maya said softly. Eleanor lowered herself into the chair beside her. I should have done many things sooner. Maya looked at the older woman's face, at the lines around her eyes, at the grief she had carried so long it had become part of her posture. Were you afraid of him? Yes, Eleanor said. But not only him. I was afraid of what would happen to you if the wrong people learned you had survived. Maya swallowed. I grew up not knowing anything. I know. That kind of protection feels a lot like loss. Eleanor's eyes filled, but she did not look away. It was loss. I will not dress it up as sacrifice and ask you to be grateful. That honesty hurt more than an excuse would have. Maya looked down at her bandaged arm. Why did you keep the letter in the scholarship file? Because Denise asked me to. Eleanor folded her hands. Your mother believed education was the one door men like Whitman could not lock forever. She said, if the truth had to hide somewhere, it should hide inside a future. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. Her mother's words from the letter moved through her again. If Maya lives, do not let her grow up inside fear. I don't know how to feel, Maya said. Eleanor gave a tired smile. Then, don't decide today. Paul Granger approached with a folder under one arm. Judge Mercer has ordered the microfilm and pocket watch transferred under escort to Atlanta. The lab will send preliminary images by tomorrow morning if the film is readable. Marcus Hill came in from the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. He covered the receiver and said, Lorraine's holding the front page. She wants to know whether to call it evidence transfer ordered or Whitman under review. Paul sighed. Tell her not to make my life harder. Marcus returned to the call. Lorraine, Paul says. Choose the one that sells more papers. Maya almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. She looked toward the evidence table where the iron box had been carried away. Without it, the room seemed emptier and more dangerous. Eleanor noticed. The box is safe. I know, but you don't believe safe is a real word anymore. Maya looked at her. Do you? Eleanor's answer was quiet. Not alone. That afternoon, Judge Mercer allowed Maya and Eleanor a supervised meeting in a small conference room away from reporters. Mrs. Alden brought tea in paper cups because she said no one in that courthouse knew how to heal anything. But hot tea at least made people sit down. Marcus waited outside. Paul stayed near the door, reading documents he already knew by heart. Eleanor placed an envelope on the table. I wrote this years ago. Not the letter your mother wrote. Mine. Maya stared at it. For me? Yes. I never sent it. I never knew if sending it would protect you or expose you. Maya took the envelope, but did not open it immediately. What does it say? The truth I could bear to write at the time. Not all of it, but enough. Maya opened it carefully. The paper inside was softer than her mother's letter, written in a more fragile hand. Dear Maya, though that was not your name when I first held you. Her breath caught. Eleanor watched her read, silent. The letter did not describe the fire in detail. It did not recreate horror or ask Maya to imagine what had been lost. Instead, it spoke of aftermath. A hospital hallway, a baby wrapped in a clean blanket, a nurse who understood that paperwork could become a weapon, and a small group of ordinary adults who chose quiet courage over public applause. Eleanor wrote that Maya's first name had been chosen again because it meant illusion, not as deception, but as a reminder that the world people saw was often not the whole truth. Maya read until the words blurred. At the bottom, Eleanor had written, "I have loved you from a distance, because distance was the only shelter I knew how to build." Maya set the letter down. "You watched me grow up? From far away," Eleanor admitted. "A school photo once, a graduation notice. Your adoptive grandmother sent word through the pastor when you got into college. I never came close. Because of Whitman, because of fear," Eleanor said. "And because fear can wear a righteous face when you let it live too long." Maya pressed her fingers to her eyes. "My adoptive grandmother knew? She knew enough to keep you safe, not enough to carry the whole burden." Maya thought of the woman who had raised her, who made canned soup on hard nights and grilled cheese when money was short, who told her to stand straight when people wanted her small. Suddenly, love looked less simple than it had yesterday. It had many hands, many silences, many wounds. Paul's phone buzzed. He checked it and went still. Maya looked up. "What?" "The Attorney General's office has opened a preliminary inquiry." Eleanor exhaled slowly. Marcus knocked once and stepped inside without waiting. And Whitman just retained counsel. Mrs. Alden, standing by the coffee tray, muttered. About time the man met procedure. For a brief second, everyone smiled. Then Marcus's expression sobered. "There's something else. Reeves is holding a press statement in 20 minutes. He's going to claim Maya tampered with archival records." Paul cursed under his breath. Maya folded Eleanor's letter and placed it back in the envelope. "Can he prove that?" "No," Marcus said. "But he doesn't need proof by 5 o'clock. He needs doubt." Eleanor reached across the table and touched Maya's wrist, gently. "Remember what your mother did. She did not fight, noise with noise. She left a record." Maya nodded slowly. "Then we answer with a record." Paul looked wary. "Meaning?" Maya stood. "We release the access log." Reeves entered the Carter file before the hearing. Whitman's chambers followed. "That's not opinion. That's not emotion. That's a timestamp." Marcus's eyes brightened. "Lorraine will enjoy this." Paul pointed at him. "Carefully. Always," Marcus said, then paused. "Usually?" Maya turned to Eleanor. "Are you ready for your name to be tied to mine publicly?" Eleanor's mouth trembled, but her voice did not. "Maya, I have been tied to you since the night I carried you out of a story men wanted finished." The words settled between them, heavy and tender. Maya reached for her hand. Then, "Let's stop letting them write the ending." By evening, the Herald posted the first article with documents attached. The access log, the disposal order, the protective transfer order, and the scholarship trust summary. No adjectives were needed. The records spoke in dates, names, and signatures. At 6:14 p.m., Daniel Reeves canceled his press statement. At 6:27 p.m., Judge Whitman's attorney issued a short denial that denied almost nothing. At 6:43 p.m., Maya sat in the courthouse conference room with Eleanor's letter in her lap and watched the city begin to read what had been hidden from it. Eleanor sat beside her, tired but calm. "Justice doesn't feel fair," Maya said quietly. Eleanor looked at her. "It rarely does at first." Maya stared at the screen where her father's name appeared in a public document for the first time in 25 years. Then, "What does it feel like?" Eleanor took her hand. "At the beginning, it feels like pain finally being believed." By morning, Savannah had learned Harold Whitman's name all over again. It was on television screens in diners, on phones at church offices, in quiet conversations between retired courthouse employees who suddenly remembered things they had once been told to forget. At the Blue Willow Diner, an old man lowered his newspaper and said to nobody in particular, "I always thought that man smiled like he owned the truth." His wife stirred sugar into her coffee and replied, "Maybe today he finds out it was only rented." Maya heard none of that until later. At 9 o'clock, She was back inside courtroom 3, seated behind Paul Granger with Eleanor beside her. The old woman wore the same pale blue sweater, freshly washed and carefully folded at the cuffs. Her hands were steady today. That gave Maya courage. Judge Mercer entered with 2 thick folders and no patience for theater. We are here to review the emergency findings related to the evidence transfer and the pending charges against Mrs. Eleanor Brooks. I will remind everyone in this courtroom that we are proceeding on record. Daniel Reeves stood at the prosecution table, but he looked different now. His silver hair was still perfect, his tie still straight, yet the polish had become thin. He glanced once toward the rear of the courtroom, where Harold Whitman sat with his attorney, a broad-shouldered man named Charles Vickers, who looked as though he had been paid to appear calm on behalf of frightened men. Judge Mercer looked to Paul. "Mr. Granger, proceed." Paul rose with a yellow legal pad in hand. "Your Honor, yesterday the court stayed Mrs. Brooks' trial pending review of newly discovered evidence. Since then, the defense has received preliminary confirmation from the independent lab in Atlanta that the microfilm found in Samuel Carter's pocket watch is readable. The lab transmitted still images under seal at 7:18 this morning." A murmur moved across the gallery. Judge Mercer nodded to Mrs. Alden. "Display only the court-approved image set." A screen lowered at the side of the courtroom. The first image appeared, grainy but legible. A ledger page with columns of names, dates, and payments. Maya gripped the edge of her chair. She did not need anyone to explain what she was seeing. Records had a language of their own, and this one spoke clearly. Paul pointed to the screen. The entries show payments from accounts connected to the Heritage Order Benevolent Society, to several individuals identified by initials. One repeated entry is marked H.W. Vickers rose. "Objection. Initials are not identity," Judge Mercer said. "Noted. Sit down." Paul advanced the image. A second page appeared, this one bearing typed meeting notes. Near the top was the name Harold Whitman, legal counsel. The courtroom went very quiet. Paul continued. "This page places Judge Whitman in direct legal advisory meetings with the organization 2 weeks before the Carter fire. The next image is a memorandum referring to Samuel and Denise Carter as a containment concern." Maya felt Eleanor's hand find hers beneath the table. Daniel Reeves stood. "Your Honor, the state has not had independent time to authenticate these materials." Judge Mercer looked at him over her glasses. "The state objected to independent review. The objection was overruled. The review has begun." Reeves swallowed. "The state asks for a continuance." Paul turned toward him. "Mrs. Brooks has spent enough years waiting." Eleanor's voice, soft but clear, rose behind him. "I have." Judge Mercer did not correct her. She looked at Reeves. "Request denied." Paul drew a breath. "Your Honor, the same microfilm contains references to a scholarship disruption plan. The date corresponds with the week Mr. Brooks' insurance funds were scheduled to be transferred into the Eleanor Brooks Charitable Education Trust." The next image appeared. Maya saw the phrase before anyone read it aloud. "Delay Brooks disbursement. Prevent minority education transfer. Use Reeves if criminal leverage required." Daniel Reeves went pale. The courtroom reacted in waves, first whispers, then gasps, then a hard silence when Judge Mercer lifted her hand. Paul's voice sharpened. "Your Honor, this phrase directly connects the prosecution of Mrs. Brooks to an effort to stop her scholarship fund. It also names Mr. Reeves as a tool of criminal leverage." Reeves stood too quickly. "That is an outrageous interpretation." Maya rose before she realized she had moved. "Then, give us a better one." Paul turned. "Maya." "No," Judge Mercer said. "Let her finish." Maya looked at Reeves. "You told everyone Eleanor killed for money, but she was giving the money away. You said it was greed, but the records say you were stopping a scholarship. You said this was justice, but the only thing you protected was a lie." Reeves's face hardened. "Miss Williams, you are grieving. You are not thinking clearly." Maya stepped into the aisle, her bandaged arm resting at her side. "I have never thought more clearly in my life." A ripple of approval moved through the gallery, but Maya did not look at them. She looked at Whitman. He sat motionless beside his attorney. Judge Mercer's voice cut through the room. "Mr. Reeves, did you access the Carter fire file last week?" Reeves turned back to the bench. "I accessed many files in preparation for trial. That was not my question." He hesitated. "Yes. Did you disclose that access to the defense?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you disclose to this court that materials related to Mrs. Brooks' Scholarship Trust had a possible connection to an older investigation involving Judge Whitman?" Reeves's mouth opened, then closed. Judge Mercer removed her glasses. "Answer: no." Eleanor lowered her eyes, not in shame, but exhaustion. The kind that comes when a person finally hears the lock click open after years inside a room. Paul spoke again, quieter now. "Your Honor, the defense moves for immediate dismissal of all charges against Eleanor Brooks." Reeves objected, but his voice had lost its strength. "The state needs time to review." Judge Mercer looked at the screen, then at the old woman sitting beside Maya. The state had time to accuse. It had time to try. It had time to hide what it knew. What it does not get is unlimited time to repair a prosecution built on concealed evidence. She lifted the top folder and read from the order in front of her. "The charges against Eleanor Brooks are dismissed with prejudice, effective immediately." For a second, Eleanor did not react. Then Paul turned to her and whispered, "You're free." Maya felt the old woman's hand tighten around hers. Eleanor's face crumpled, but she did not sob. She only bowed her head, as though receiving something too sacred for noise. Judge Mercer continued, "This court refers Daniel Reeves to the State Bar Disciplinary Authority and the Attorney General's Office for investigation into prosecutorial misconduct, suppression of evidence, and potential conspiracy. This court further refers all materials involving Harold Whitman to the Judicial Conduct Commission and appropriate criminal authorities." Vickers stood. "Your Honor, Judge Whitman objects to any implication of wrongdoing." Judge Mercer looked at him. "Then he may object in the proper forum, with counsel, under oath." The words struck the room like a closing door. Maya turned toward Whitman. For 25 years, he had lived inside titles: judge, counselor, honorable, sir. Now those words began slipping from him one by one. Whitman met her eyes. "You think this is victory?" Maya did not raise her voice. "No." He seemed surprised. She glanced at Eleanor, then back at him. "This is the part where the truth gets out of the basement." Marcus Hill, seated in the back row, wrote the sentence down. Judge Mercer struck the gavel once. "Court is adjourned." The sound was clean and final. Reporters surged toward the doors, but Maya stayed where she was as Paul helped Eleanor stand. The old woman turned to her, tears shining on her cheeks. "You saved me," Eleanor whispered. Maya shook her head. "You saved me first." Outside, the courthouse bells began ringing noon. For the first time, Maya did not hear them as something old and distant. She heard them as time beginning again. The hallway outside courtroom 3 erupted the moment the doors opened. But Maya heard the noise as if it were coming from another building. Cameras flashed. Reporters called Eleanor's name, and someone asked whether Harold Whitman would be arrested before sundown. Paul Granger moved in front of Eleanor with one arm slightly raised, not pushing anyone, just creating enough space for an old woman to breathe. Maya stayed beside her. "Keep your eyes on me," she said softly. Eleanor gave a faint smile. "I was a nurse for 34 years, child. I've walked through worse hallways." Marcus Hill appeared on Maya's other side, notebook in hand and phone tucked against his shoulder. "Lorraine says, the headline writes itself." Paul groaned. "Please tell Lorraine that freedom is not a headline." Marcus paused. "You clearly have not worked in newspapers." At the far end of the hall, Harold Whitman stood with his attorney and 2 men in dark suits from the Attorney General's office. He was no longer speaking. That unsettled Maya more than his anger had. A man like Whitman did not become harmless when quiet. He became careful. One of the investigators approached Maya with a respectful nod. "Miss Williams, we'll need a formal statement later today." Maya looked at Eleanor. "Can it wait an hour?" The investigator's eyes softened when he saw the old woman's trembling hands. "It can wait, too." Eleanor whispered, "Thank you, sir." The man nodded again. "Ma'am, that one word, simple and decent, seemed to touch something in Eleanor. She lowered her eyes and breathed out slowly, as if dignity itself had been returned in a form no larger than a polite address. They left through a side entrance to avoid the worst of the crowd. Outside, Savannah's noon heat pressed against the courthouse steps. Live oaks shaded the square, Spanish moss hanging from the branches like old secrets. Across the street, a group of older black women from a nearby church stood quietly behind the press line. One of them raised her hand to Eleanor, palm open, not waving exactly, more like blessing. Eleanor stopped. Maya followed her gaze. "Do you know them?" "No," Eleanor said, "but I know what it means to be seen." Paul drove them to Street Agnes Medical Center, not because Eleanor was in danger, but because Judge Mercer had ordered a medical evaluation before any more statements. Maya sat in the back of Paul's aging Chevrolet with Eleanor, while Marcus followed in his Crown Victoria. For a few minutes, no one spoke. The radio played an old country song low enough that the words blurred into the road noise. Eleanor looked at Maya's bandaged arm. "You should have gone to the hospital yesterday. You should have told the truth 25 years ago." Paul inhaled sharply from the front seat, but Eleanor did not flinch. "Yes," she said, "I should have." Maya regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth, but Eleanor's honesty left no place for apology to hide. "I'm angry," Maya said. "You have earned that. I'm grateful too. You have earned that also." Maya looked out the window at the old houses passing by. White porches, brick steps, flags moving in the humid air. "I don't know how both can live in the same body." Eleanor rested her folded hands in her lap. "They will learn to share." At the hospital, the doctor examined Eleanor and cleared her to rest under supervision. A nurse cleaned Maya's arm again and insisted on proper stitches this time. Maya sat still while the needle moved through skin, staring at the wall clock. Its hands clicked forward with ordinary cruelty. Marcus waited in the hallway with 2 coffees and a paper bag. "Grilled cheese," he said when Maya came out. "The hospital cafeteria's highest achievement." Maya took the sandwich. "Thank you." He handed the second coffee to Paul, then lowered his voice. The Attorney General's office executed a preservation order on Whitman's chambers. Paul blinked. "Already?" Judge Mercer moved fast. Mrs. Alden moved faster. Maya looked up. "Did they find anything?" Marcus hesitated, which told her the answer mattered. "What?" "They found a private storage safe behind his old casebooks. Inside were copies of disciplinary complaints, donor lists tied to the heritage order, and a file labeled Carter." Maya's grip tightened around the sandwich bag. "My parents?" Marcus nodded. "And you?" The hallway seemed to narrow around her. Paul stepped closer. "Maya, breathe." "I'm breathing." "No, you're standing upright. That is different." Marcus placed a folded printout in her hand. "Lorraine got confirmation from a source. The file listed your original birth record, the name change, and the family that adopted you. Whitman knew you survived." The words entered her slowly, then, all at once. Whitman knew. For 25 years, he had not merely feared a surviving witness. He had watched the evidence grow into a woman working beneath his courthouse. Maya leaned against the wall. "He knew I was downstairs." Marcus's voice was gentle. "It looks that way." Eleanor appeared at the end of the hall, supported by a nurse. She saw Maya's face and understood before anyone explained. "He knew," Maya said. Eleanor closed her eyes. "Then he let you live because he thought you were harmless." Maya almost laughed, but it came out broken. "A records clerk." Eleanor came closer. "No. A record he failed to destroy." That evening, Judge Mercer reconvened a brief emergency hearing to enter the new findings into the docket. Courtroom 3 was quieter this time, almost reverent. The iron box sat on the evidence table, sealed and tagged. Beside it lay the brass pocket watch in a clear evidence sleeve, its stopped hands visible through the plastic. Judge Mercer read the preservation order aloud. She named the Carter file, the heritage order materials, the scholarship suppression memo, and the newly discovered record showing Whitman had monitored Maya's identity after the fire. With every sentence, the courtroom lost another illusion. Whitman was not present. His attorney waived appearance. Daniel Reeves was present, seated behind his own counsel now. no longer at the prosecutor's table. That image alone told Savannah more than any headline could. Judge Mercer looked at Eleanor. "Mrs. Brooks, your charitable trust documents are restored to legal standing. The court sees no barrier to the insurance funds being transferred according to your late husband's instructions." Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth. Maya whispered, "The scholarship can happen." Eleanor nodded through tears. That was all he wanted. Judge Mercer then turned to Maya. "Miss Williams, the court recognizes that the Carter materials concern you personally. They will remain protected, but accessible to you and your counsel." Maya almost said she had no counsel. Then Paul leaned over and murmured, "You do now. Unless you object." She looked at him. "Can I afford you?" Paul smiled tiredly. "After today, I believe I owe the universe some pro bono work." When the hearing ended, Maya walked to the evidence table. She did not touch the box. She only looked at the pocket watch through the plastic sleeve. Stopped at 2:17. For years, time had moved without telling her where it began. Now the beginning sat in front of her, scarred and small and still ticking in a different way. Eleanor stood beside her. Samuel carried that watch every day. Maya kept her eyes on it. Did he know it would survive? "I think he hoped someone would." Maya nodded slowly. "Then we make sure it does." Across the courtroom, Mrs. Alden turned off the evidence camera, and Marcus closed his notebook. The room no longer felt like the place where Maya had been shoved, cut, and dismissed. It felt like the place where a buried life had finally been entered into the record. As they left, Maya glanced once at the empty bench where Whitman had once sat. For the first time, it looked like just a chair. 6 months later, the iron box sat on a shelf in Maya Williams' small office, no longer hidden in a basement, no longer wrapped in dust, and no longer waiting for someone brave enough to open it. The office was on the second floor of a renovated brick building near East Broad Street. The sign downstairs read Carter Brooks Justice Project in simple black letters. Eleanor had insisted Maya's parents' name come first. Maya had insisted Eleanor's name stay there too. "You carried the truth longer than anyone," Maya told her. Eleanor had answered. "And you carried it into court." The building still smelled faintly of fresh paint and old wood. On most mornings, Maya arrived before 8, unlocked the front door, made coffee in a dented machine donated by Mrs. Alden, and opened the blinds so sunlight could fall across the waiting room. There were no children's toys, no bright murals, no promises painted on walls. This was a place for adults who had been ignored by employers, landlords, courts, boards, agencies, and people who knew how to make cruelty sound procedural. Maya was back in law school part-time now, taking evening classes in Atlanta twice a week and working at the project during the day. Paul Granger served as supervising attorney. Marcus Hill called himself unpaid trouble, though everyone knew he wrote grant proposals better than half the lawyers in Savannah. Lorraine Price had published a 6-part investigation that won awards and made several retired officials suddenly remember doctor's appointments whenever reporters called. Harold Whitman resigned before the Judicial Conduct Commission could remove him. His attorney called it a decision made for health and family reasons. Marcus wrote that men often discovered family after power stopped answering the phone. The Attorney General's inquiry continued, slow but steady, pulling names from ledgers, old donor lists, and meeting notes that had slept too long in private safes. Daniel Reeves lost his position first, then his law license came under review. When reporters asked if he regretted prosecuting Eleanor Brooks, he said only that history had become politicized. Eleanor read that line in the newspaper at the Blue Willow Diner and folded the page very carefully. "Men like that always call it history when they can no longer call it law," she said. Maya smiled over her coffee. "You should let Marcus quote you. He already does without permission." The scholarship fund opened in spring. Eleanor stood at the podium in a navy dress and sensible shoes, while the families of adult students filled the community hall with quiet pride. The fund was not large enough to repair everything. No fund was, but it paid tuition, bought books, covered exam fees, and gave working adults a second chance at doors that had once been closed with polite smiles. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she kept her notes folded in her pocket. "My parents believed records mattered," she said. Eleanor Brooks believed silence could protect me until truth was strong enough to stand. I don't know if justice is ever fully fair. I know only this: pain changes when it is finally believed. No one clapped at first. The room sat with the words, as older people often did when something reached places applause could not. Then Eleanor stood, and everyone followed. After the ceremony, Eleanor came to Maya with the brass pocket watch in her hands. It had been released from evidence after forensic imaging was complete. The hands still pointed to 217. "I want you to have it," Eleanor said. Maya touched the scratched cover. "It was my father's." "Yes. Then it belongs with his record." Eleanor shook her head. "No, Maya. It belongs with his daughter." Maya took it carefully. The watch felt warm from Eleanor's palm. For a moment, she thought of Samuel Carter carrying it through ordinary days, never knowing it would one day hold the proof his child needed to know who he was. She thought of Denise Carter hiding the future inside scholarship papers. She thought of Eleanor, younger then, frightened but stubborn, choosing a living baby over a clean conscience. "I'm still angry sometimes," Maya admitted. Eleanor nodded. "Good. Anger can be honest when it stops asking to be cruel. I'm still grateful too. That is also allowed." Maya closed the watch in her hand. "I used to think knowing the truth would make everything feel whole. And it made things real." Eleanor looked at her with sad tenderness. "Real is the beginning of whole." That afternoon, Maya returned to the office alone. Savannah was warm and bright outside, carriage horses moving slowly along the square, older couples stepping carefully over uneven brick sidewalks, church bells ringing as if the city had always been innocent. Maya knew better now. Cities were not innocent or guilty. People were. Records were. Choices were. She placed the pocket watch beside the iron box on the shelf. The two objects looked plain together. One old, one scarred, both too small for the weight they carried. A knock sounded at the door. Maya turned. A middle-aged black man stood in the hallway wearing a delivery uniform, cap in his hands, worry written across his face. Beside him was a woman in her 50s, holding a folder so tightly the edges bent. "Are you Miss Williams?" the woman asked. "Yes, ma'am. We were told you help people when paperwork starts lying." Maya looked at the folder, then at their tired faces. Not children, not headlines, just adults who had worked, paid bills, followed rules, and still found themselves standing outside a door they were afraid to open. She glanced once at the iron box. Then she smiled gently. "Come in. Sit down. Tell me everything from the beginning." The couple entered. Maya closed the door behind them and took her seat at the desk. Her arm had healed, though a thin scar remained. She no longer hid it. Some marks were not meant to shame the wounded. Some marks were proof that the truth had met resistance and survived. As the woman began to speak, Maya opened a fresh legal pad and wrote the date at the top. For years, men like Whitman had trusted silence, trusted fear, trusted that records could be buried deep enough to become harmless. They had mistaken quiet people for empty rooms. They had mistaken clerks for furniture. They had mistaken old women for easy endings. They were wrong. Maya looked at the couple across from her and listened, really listened, the way her mother must have listened, the way Eleanor had listened, the way every act of justice begins before anyone ever steps into court. Outside, Savannah moved on under its moss and sunlight. Inside, the record opened again. Some truths survive because one person refuses to look away. The lesson of this story is that truth may be buried, delayed, or hidden behind powerful names, but it never truly dies. Maya's courage reminds us that ordinary people can challenge injustice when they refuse to stay silent. Eleanor's sacrifice shows that protecting someone may come at a great cost, but love and loyalty can survive even decades of fear. In the end, justice is not only about punishment, it is about restoring dignity, honoring the forgotten, and proving that even one voice can reopen a truth the world tried to lock away. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, I would truly love to hear your thoughts on the storytelling, the emotional pacing, or whatever stayed with you after listening. Every comment you share helps make the next stories more honest, moving, and meaningful. And if you have a powerful or meaningful story of your own, please do not hesitate to send it to the channel. It may become the next story to touch and inspire thousands of others. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.